Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tuesdays with Tally. This is episode 45, and I'm your host, Brian Tally. The mission and the goal of this podcast is to bring an engaging conversation that will add value to the lives of everyday people. We will inspire, encourage, educate, and tell the stories of some of America's finest men and women in an effort to motivate you to live your life to its fullest potential. Be sure to follow us on social media and on Spotify. The online information and handles are all located on the scrolling ticker at the bottom portion of your screen. Be sure to like and share the program as well. You can also support the program by going to Anchor FM or Spotify and clicking the support button. Also, become a program sponsor today. Program sponsorships include a custom written script to advertise your business to its fullest potential to get the results you're looking for. Let me help you market your business. Advertise right here on this program today. To learn more, email me directly at thetallybill@gmail.com. That's thetallybill@gmail.com. Folks, we have a very special guest joining us on today's program. It's not every day you could sit down and have a conversation with a crew chief on a C-17 Globemaster. The C-17 is the most flexible cargo aircraft to enter the Air Force. The C-17 is capable of rapid strategic delivery of troops and all types of cargo to maintain operating bases or directly to forward bases in the deployment area. The aircraft can perform tactical airlift and airdrop missions, as well as transport ambulatory patients during aeromedical evacuations. Scott became a crew chief on the C-17 just months before 9/11. There are many job descriptions of a flying crew chief. One in particular, he has led the mechanic on the aircraft when flying into foreign international airports that didn't have Airforce mechanical help on the ground. Scott's mission was to fly generals to meet other foreign dignitaries to build and maintain relationships that were formed and to keep clear lines of communication. Scott would spend a few days in each country, then fly to the next. His job was to make sure they didn't get stuck in any one country and the trip went along as planned. In his off time, he had opportunities to sightsee and experience dozens of different countries. These trips were primarily to the Middle East, South America, Asia, Europe, and Africa. The two regions he flew most often were in South America and the Middle East. This is how he spent his summer and the fall leading up to 9/11. Things were going great. He was traveling and having a blast. Then on that fateful September morning, he was catching up on some much needed sleep before he was supposed to fly to Greenland the next day. Instead, he was awoken by a fellow crew chief who alerted him that the towers had just been hit. Folks, the rest is history from there. Needless to say, there was no more flying generals around and staying at five-star resorts. His mission would abruptly change, and he was forced into action. Scott flew and participated in over 50 combat missions in support of OIF and OEF as the crew chief of the C-17 Globemaster. With that, we are honored to be joined today on the program by my brother, my little brother, the legend, a warrior, Scott Tally. How are you?
I'm good, bro. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. Another day, another dollar, another podcast. You know, God put this podcast on my heart over 50 days ago, and you are episode 45. I am following the path that I am supposed to be on. It feels great. I haven't been happier.
Tuesdays with Tally. It's more like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday with Tally.
I've heard that.
I like it.
I know. I've heard that. People should be like, "Oh, today with Tally," or whatever it is, right?
Joe Rogan does one every day. You can do the veteran Joe Rogan every day.
Well, look, it's like this, man. My very first podcast was on a Tuesday. And on a mindfulness walk some 55 days ago, it was a Monday night. God said, "You will do a podcast." And I'm like, "I don't know how to do that." Well, I'm going to teach you. I'm going to show you the ropes. I reached out to a couple guys. They showed me the way. And within 2 days, I was on Spotify, and I created all these YouTube. I got a YouTube now. I got a Twitter. I got a TikTok. It's like, I'm just trying to get the word out. I'm trying to add value to the lives of everyday people through folks like you that have so much value to be added to the lives of everyday people. And again, I am following the steps that God wants me on and to lead the life that I was intended to live. And again, it feels good to know that I am doing just that. But this program today is about you. And we've got a lot to talk about here. You look, a lot of my friends, a lot of the folks that follow this show and this program, let's face it, they're Marines, they're soldiers, they're seamen, they're in the Navy, they're special operations guys, they're ground guys. We don't have a lot of pilots out there, and let alone you're not a pilot, but you're a crew chief that flew and worked in unison with pilots. And you were in charge of a very expensive and very large cargo airplane, like I had said in the intro. This aircraft is one of the best that our nation and really that the world has to offer. And so I think you could add a lot of good insight to folks out there that may have wanted to know about what a C-17 is like and what the mission is that comes with that job. Not only the mission of the C-17, but also the mission of a crew chief on a C-17. Um, but before that, let's get to meet you. Now, you grew up as a kid in San Diego, sunny San Diego. What was it like growing up as a kid there?
It was awesome. We spent a lot of time at the beach, surfing, skateboarding, learned how to surf at Dog Beach. Just being a kid in Southern California, it was nice. We didn't know any better though, so it was what it was. But it definitely left some lifelong passions of mine. Like, for instance, I was telling you the other day, like, I'm going on a surfing trip. I'm taking my kiddos this winter. We're going to go to Costa Rica for a little bit over a week, and we're gonna do surfing. And it's been probably 30 years or so since I've surfed, but it's something I haven't forgot about how much I love doing that. And I thought, heck, my kids are at the age now that I feel comfortable with them in the ocean swimming, and why not, instill that passion maybe for them as well. So yeah, there was a lot of things growing up that had changed the way that we think of life and how we pursue it. So it was good.
Love it. And now you're going to share those memories and create new ones with your children in Costa Rica while you're shredding the waves. And look, you were good. I mean, look, you're an athlete. You were good at it. So I think it's going to be like riding a bike. You're going to get right back up, and you just maybe sore the next day. So prepare for that.
I think paddling will be tough, but I do something in Lake Powell every year. I call old man surfing. So we get behind the boat with a stand-up paddleboard and hang onto the rope, and obviously we're not too close to the boat. We're a little ways away, but we try to surf that wake on a big stand-up paddleboard, and that's really what drove me to do this trip this winter. Was I've had so much fun the last few years stand-up paddleboard surfing off the back of a boat in Lake Powell, that I'm like, let's do this. Let's get in the ocean and do this for real. So anyhow, that's what we're doing.
That is awesome. I had Lori Keaton on the program a couple of weeks ago, who is the world record holder for wakeboarding behind a boat. She did it for, I want to say, 18 or 19 consecutive hours. She broke her old world record of 8 hours. She lives in Indiana and literally lives on a lake there, and that's all she does. I mean, that's a great podcast. You got to get back and you got to watch that one. It was absolutely incredible to know that there's people out there, and she takes veterans out. She takes first responders out are going through some hard times in life, and it's very therapeutic that she's able to really teach so many veterans out there uh, the therapeutic the therapy of water. I mean,
Mhm.
water is very therapeutic, especially when you're out there, like say surfing, and you're out there and you're paddling, and you get out there and you sit on the board, and it's magical. So
Yeah.
people get to experience that, especially if they've been going through some hard times. They can think and they can make some better decisions in life, and get back and get that train back on the tracks and head in the right direction. So you know, I remember you being a kid. We'd go to Cabrillo National Monument all the time, and we would visit Fort Rosecrans, some of the most beautiful, beautiful parts of our country, perhaps some of the most beautiful parts of the world. Cabrillo National Monument is absolutely incredible. And I remember as kids, we would overlook that point, and we would see the naval ships coming in, and we'd see the aircraft carriers, and we'd see the fighter jets, and Top Gun was out. And I remember one day in particular, you said, I want this book. It wasn't a toy. It wasn't a stuffed animal. It wasn't those little army men that everybody had. It was a book, and it was a naval book that had naval boats and naval fighter jets and naval helicopters and search and rescue and Navy SEAL stuff all in there. And at that time, I think I felt that you had some connection, possibly to maybe thinking, hey, one day I may serve my country, and I may be in the Navy. Did you ever think about that? Or, I mean, did that ever cross your mind?
Yeah, I mean that book, I still have that book. It's in my library right now. That's a cool book still. I haven't
Mhm.
looked at it in a while, but yeah, I have that book. Yeah, I think that's the route I was going on. When I graduated high school and started college, it was I think with that in mind, I was going for a aerospace engineering degree, and then it kind of just dwarfed from there. But yeah, initially I think it was the Navy that I was most interested in. But it's hard to know when you're a kid what you want to do. I mean, there's so many passions I had. Baseball player, I think, was number one. Watching Tony Gwynn grow up, but my baseball skills weren't on par to make that happen. So yeah, Navy was one of them, and then kind of dwarfed into the Air Force. Um, I think primarily because I saw you join the Marines a couple years before me, and you'd come home and be like, "You're not joining the Marines. You got to go in the Air Force. They get treated the best. They got the best bases, the best trips, the best food." And so you kind of talked me into that, looking after me as your little brother. So
Look, guys like me are kind of meant for the Corps, right? Like, I'm just a freaking driver alpha, and I'm looking out for my little brother. I'm like, man, I just want the best for this guy, and this and that. And I just thought that would be a better career choice. And let's face it, you're a hell of a lot smarter than me. I mean,
yeah,
my ASVAB was freaking. I mean, pull it out of the gutter. I mean, I'm lucky I wasn't just a freaking cook on some line on some base out in the middle of 29 Palms serving freaking chow to Marines. So, I mean, aerospace engineering was what was in your mind in third, fourth, fifth grade. And I didn't really have anything on my mind except when I was going to get suspended from the next school fight I was going to be in and get sent home and get beat by mom. So, I mean, that's, the difference between me and you. However, I think I am better looking now. Yeah, look, I know I'm older, but you're definitely more gray than me, man.
yeah, I think so. I think so.
God, I love you. Oh, man. Now, growing up in San Diego, we would end up moving to Woodland Park, Colorado. I would be 15. You would be 13. I'd be going into high school, and you would be going into middle school. Describe that transition from going to San Diego to landing at 8,500 feet above sea level. And all of a sudden coming into a community where there was cowboys and everything else that we had never really grown up with. What was that like for you?
So I think it would be hard on some folks that maybe had the same school they went to for years and years and the same group of friends. But, we grew up with a single mom and she worked multiple jobs. And a lot of times that made us switch schools often and switch locations around San Diego. And so it's not like I was leaving a bunch of lifelong friends in San Diego. And so at first, it was a lot of uncertainty when we got to Woodland Park, but we ended up spending our whole middle and high school there. And so actually the stability of being in that one school was nice. I could actually make some lifelong friends that I still have today and really enjoyed my time up in Woodland. So
I agree. I know I went to a few more schools than you because I am 2 years older. Yeah, I mean, I do have a couple of friends that I do keep in contact with that I grew up with in San Diego. One has recently passed away over the last couple of years, and that was a kid that we used to run the streets with over at the Blue Roofs area over off of Claremont Drive and Claremont Mesa. And but yeah, you're right. The majority of my lifelong friends are all from Woodland Park because we did lay some roots down there. Unlike we really didn't have that opportunity to really lay down the roots in one school for a long period of time to really build those relationships. So I think you're absolutely right on point with that, and that's a really good answer to what could be a difficult question. Now, you ended up going through high school and graduating from Woodland Park, and you would join college. I think you were going to Pikes Peak at the time, and you were getting some classes out of the way because your goal was to end up in Fort Collins and to go to Colorado State. When was the point that you said, okay, I'm joining the military, and these are my reasons behind joining the military?
Well, so out of high school, actually, I went to UCCS, University of Colorado.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I went to Pikes Peak again.
No, I ended up at Pikes Peak. We call it the Harvard of the West. Okay,
dude.
And by the way, it's not a community
PCC
college anymore. It is a state college. We're up in the game at PPCU. So I started.
Dude, I'm gonna get an alumni sweater of Pikes Peak, and I'll be like, dude, I used to go here when it was a community college, man.
Great education. I went to CSU afterwards, but it was I think I took my best classes were at Pikes Peak Community College. Same with Front Range Community College up in Fort Collins. Nothing wrong with those community college schools. Oftentimes it's the same professors that are just taking on additional work and smaller class sizes. It was great. I sound like a spokesperson for them. Basically, so I went to UCCS. I was going to start the engineering department. I was a little bit too into hanging out with friends and partying a little too much. And so my grades suffered, and I was paying for it on my own. I didn't have any handouts, didn't have any college funds paying for it. Nobody was forgiving my loans at the time. So I had no other choice other than go get a job or join the military and chat with you. We decided Airforce was the right route. Talking to Uncle Jimmy, who was in the Air Force, he kind of talked about some career opportunities and some things that he would recommend I go into. And again, I wanted to be around airplanes and travel as much as I could. So really it came down to like loadmaster or crew chief. And what was unique about the decision I made was I really didn't realize how mechanically inclined I was at the time and how much I like fixing things. But it really has become a passion of mine when I'm not working my 9-to-5 job. I love to create things, in the yard, the house, landscape projects, remodel projects. tree houses, all that fun stuff. So yeah, I've had that passion, but I didn't really pinpoint it at the time. So yeah, it started with me flunking out of school, needing to grow up a little bit, and that led me to the Air Force.
Hmm. Now, when you signed up for the Air Force, did you go in knowing that you would end up being a crew chief on the C-17s, or did you go in open contract and figure it out after you graduated from boot camp?
So I went in knowing I would be a crew chief, but you don't know the aircraft until you get to tech school. And so I was really looking back. I've also been a crew chief on the F-16s, and I've worked on numerous airplanes. 130s, 141s, the Russian Antonov planes when we were overseas. I mean, we've worked on a lot of different aircraft in some of my experiences, and 17 is the one. I love it. That was my bird. Had some great times on that plane, and had nothing but positive memories.
I when I was in the Marine Corps, I was on tons of C-130s, I was on C-141s, I was on C-17s, I was on the C-5. The C-17 was by far the favorite airplane that I was ever transported in, and I remember I have a memory of when we flew over Alaska and we saw those, and I had seen those northern lights for the first time, and I went up to that crew chief in the C-17. This is before you had entered. I think it was probably in '98. I said, "What is that?" Like, dude, those are the Northern Lights. And I'm like, well, dude. And then shortly thereafter, we landed the bird in Anchorage, and I was just like fascinated. I'll never forget that memory. And it was just like one of those things that you find yourself in the moment of life, and you're looking at something that you've never seen before, and you're fascinated by it, and you're sharing the memory with guys that see it all the time, and every day they're like, yeah, man, those are the Northern Lights. And I was like, man, that's cool. That's like bucket list stuff that I never even knew existed.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was a very neat, it was a very neat opportunity, and again, I'm blessed to have had the opportunity to do that. Now, C-17s. This is a small community. It's a small community. Let's face it. There's not a lot of crew chiefs that are running around the country that worked on the C-17s and flew with the C-17s. Describe a day in the life of being a crew chief prior to 9/11.
So there's really two different kinds. There's most crew chiefs, and I was too, are kind of ground pounders. We're on the ground. We're recovering planes. We're sending them back up. We're doing the inspections, fueling, oil, throwing some liquid oxygen in there, tires, brakes, whatever needs fixed. It's a lot of that. And that can kind of get tiring and old, doing the same thing over and over again on the same flight line. It's an important job, but it's hard to do it day in and day out, 365. And so that's when I was in, I wanted to travel a little bit more, see different things, have different experiences. And so the C-17 was really brought on with the promise of not needing a flight engineer. And so on some of the older aircraft, like the 141 C-5, you would have flight engineers that were part of the flight crew full time. That's what they trained for, and they would be part of that crew. The 17 was designed to fly with just 2 or 3 pilots and then a loadmaster. So really a crew of 3 or 4, because it was so mechanically, I'd say a better bird. I know that every time the C-5 lands, oftentimes it would break. And so it was just supposed to be easier maintenance schedule. And so that was mostly the case, where there wasn't a whole lot of flying crew chief opportunities on the 17. And they would only take flying crew chiefs out when they knew they were on important missions and they were flying to places that didn't have Air Force bases and no support on the ground. So again, if it's air crew going over to Ramstein, going over to Sigonella, somewhere overseas, but they're flying to an Air Force base, they're not taking flying crew chiefs with them because they have support on the ground that they're fine. But when we're flying someone into Singapore or Mexico City, obviously if we're flying downrange into combat, they need to know that if something happens, that crew chief on board can get that plane back in the air and get something fixed if we can in a timely manner to get the bird flying again, because that was the safest spot for us a lot of times was in the air. So again, not every crew chief on the C-17 is a flying crew chief. It's just a select few that want that route, and I wanted that route. I wanted to go see more of the world. I was stationed in Charleston, South Carolina, which was awesome. But again, I wanted to see a little bit more of the world.
Describe the relationships that you forged over the years with these pilots and perhaps other crew chiefs. Again, when you're flying all over the world at all times of the day and night, do you build this sense of camaraderie with your flight team?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially so pre 9/11, again, flying crew chiefs weren't involved that much because there wasn't that much combat going on pre 9/11 that they needed us involved on a daily basis. But there was a couple of unique type of missions. So one of the unique missions that I was involved with was right as I became a flying crew chief. We were tasked with flying newly appointed generals around the world to meet with other foreign dignitaries. So these are one-star generals. We would load them up, have several comfort pallets, which are basically coffee carts, food carts, nice seats that recline. Not just the standard seats that we throw troops in and stuff. And so we would have multiple comfort carts, or I should say comfort pallets. And our job, again, was to fly these generals around to a country, land, sit on the ground for 2 or 3 days, and then let them meet with those foreign leaders so that if ever, push came to shove and we needed some backline communications open, they would at least have a relationship with these folks as they continue to grow in the ranks on each side. But the nice part is we would usually stay in the same hotels as the generals, and generals usually get treated pretty well. So we lucked out, and we would stay in 4- and 5-star hotels for those 2 or 3 days that we were there. And then our job was to, take a bus to the plane, fly an hour or two to the next destination, just across the next border, land, and do it all over again. And so we got to do some pretty cool things, see some pretty cool places up until 9/11. And so that was neat. I did 2 of those trips. One was down to South Africa. I'm sorry, not South Africa, South America. And the other one was over to the Middle East. And then obviously 9/11 happened, and then our mission changed dramatically.
Let's go to that morning prior to you leaving for Greenland. And Craig Lanahan awakes you, one of your best friends in the Air Force that you served with, and says, "Yo, we're under attack. Planes have just hit the World Trade Center, and we got problems going on. Check this out." Things changed for you after that in a dramatic way, to where you were called into action and you would put all of that training to use. Can you describe the days after 9/11 and how quickly you became engaged in flying combat operations overseas?
Yeah, it was kind of weird timing. I had just got back from South America. I was scheduled to go up to Greenland the next day. I think on 9/12, I was scheduled to go up to Greenland. And then, yeah, like I said, my roommate Craig at the time, who was awesome. He just retired, by the way. Give a shout out to Craig. After he worked on the 17s, doing special forces with them, he went up and worked on the presidential aircraft up in DC for the last 10 or so years. So good man right there, Craig Lanahan. But yeah, so what happened is shortly after, I want to say it was the 13th or the 14th, everybody was just on standby and we were waiting to do something. We were all, eager to do something, couldn't wait to go do our job. But I got sick one night. All of a sudden, my stomach just hurt so bad. I had to go to the emergency room, and they don't know what it was to this day. But I mean, they almost took out, internal organs. I think I had pancreatitis. And the only thing they could come up with was maybe something I ingested when I was in South America, or something that bit me or something when I was down there, because it was about a week and a half after I got back that I got pretty sick. And so I was grounded for about 2 or 3 weeks, I want to say, after 9/11, maybe even a month. And I was just chomping at the bit to get back in the air and go overseas and do something. So that was kind of tough to be grounded at that time, not knowing what was going on with my health, doing all sorts of scans and figuring out why everything was so inflamed. But it ended up, curing itself. And then soon after that, I got the call and it was on.
I remember when you were going through that, and the hair on the back of my neck just stood up, because you remember my life in January 2016, and finally, all these years later, I've had so many infectious disease doctors say, yeah, it was probably something you ingested while you were overseas, and it attached to your spine and lived in a dormant stage. And then when it woke up in January of 2016, it began to eat aggressively. So when you just said that really struck a chord with me, that, there's so many of us that serve overseas, and a lot of folks don't know the risks that are involved, especially coming from a first world country. And you're in some pretty war-torn countries. You're coming from countries that are third world. They don't have good water and this and that. And you end up ingesting something can make you really sick. So that right there, yeah, that's pretty wild, to just, hear you say that. So you're getting back in the saddle, and things are kicking off. Describe that call to say, pack your bags and we're going to war. And we need you, Scott, to run this plane and to be a member of this C-17 group of crew chiefs that would, essentially, that would lead you to performing in over 50 combat operations in Afghanistan. Describe that feeling. Describe what it was like to do these missions. And I also want you to walk us down the landings, the taking off, who you were transporting on the airplanes, and what it was all about, and just what was it like? Paint us a picture.
It was exciting. It was all happening at once. We wanted to go over there and take care of business. Everybody was on the same page, so it was good. I was really happy that I was active during the time I was, because if I wasn't, I would have wanted to be. And so it felt good to be able to do something about it, and feel part of the mission. But yeah, like most of the cargo planes, we were stationed over in Europe for the most part, and our jobs were usually 24-hour missions. We would fly in, air refuel a few times on the way down, land in the middle of the night with night vision goggles on, completely blacked out flight deck. So everything was pitch black. And I'd be in one of the doors in the back with my headset on. And basically, we're looking for people shooting at us, so we know which way to bank. but it was exciting. I remember one of the crews, and this was right when I got released to go over there. So it was probably my first or second mission in. It was a bunch of, I believe it was Delta. It was a bunch of furloughed Delta pilots that were, usually living in Atlanta. They all got laid off after 9/11 because no one was flying. And so they all got activated. And yeah, the guys were talking about how, 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, whatever it was, maybe a month ago, they were flying into, Chicago or Atlanta or down to Miami, and just talking about the civilian airports. And now here we are, blacked out, middle of the night vision goggles on, and we were landing in this really high airport. It was, I don't know the exact altitude, but there was, I want to say 12, 13, 14,000 foot mountains on both sides of us. And it was down in this valley. And we had just taken over this air base. And basically, we had to do a tactical descent, which is just circling and dropping really quickly. And we were fully loaded with troops and minesweepers, and we were dropping fast. And you can see and hear the chains, snapping tight. And I'm in the door looking for enemy fire, and hearing the crew on my headset just talk about, man, this is different than it was weeks ago when we're landing into a civilian airport. I mean, we are just falling out of the sky, completely blind. And so that was a little nerve wracking hearing the guys, because these weren't even full-time C-17 pilots. I mean, they were obviously guard or reserve, but they were weekend warriors, and so they didn't have as much flight time as some of the active duty dudes. So that was interesting. But yeah, that was a great trip, and I think we were on the ground for a total of 2 or 3 minutes. We hit hard. We slammed on the brakes. You can just smell the brakes. It was so hot when you open that back door. Everybody piled out, and we were gone in the matter of minutes. And so, yeah, it was hard to also see some of the guys go, knowing that they were going into a different type of experience than I was going back to. They would be there for months, and some of them wouldn't come home alive. And so it was hard to just see the sacrifice that they were making. And everyone's got different experiences in the service, obviously. But yeah, sometimes it was hard to see other kids that were my age going to potentially die. Because I was pretty lucky with my mission. I got to fly back to Europe, to a safe base, and then, spend some time on the ground before I'd go on the next mission. But yeah, everybody's got their own thing. But that's what happened after 9/11. We did probably 50 missions into Afghanistan, in and out of Pakistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, kind of all of the stands all around there, for probably 6 to 8 months until I was supposed to get out in March of 2002. At that point, I got stop lossed in for a few more months until July, and then got out. I believe it was July 3rd or July 4th was my release date, in which I joined the Air National Guard at that point and started working on F-16s.
Yeah, there's not too many guys that get stop lost in their career in the military, but you were one of those guys because of your skill set that you had in a very important job, if you will, on these C-17s. Now, when you went back and said, what, it was kind of scary at times. We're flying all these combat missions in, we're under fire. You're looking, through the back hatch, you're looking through the side windows, you're in communications with the pilots. The pilots were furloughed. Not all of the pilots were active duty because they activated everybody. I mean, all these birds were busy, but they had paired you up with perhaps not all the time, but for a lot of the time you were flying with, like you said, weekend warriors. Yeah, albeit they're still great pilots, but they weren't in that job 24/7, 365 like you were. Did these pilots ever lean on you for advice or for just uh, somebody to talk to, knowing that you were active duty and that you had been in this job for quite some time while they were flying for Delta 2 weeks prior to this?
No, I think there was just so much going on at the time. Once you got activated, everybody got thrown into the same pool. So there wasn't any, singling out of, somebody had more experience with the other. And pilots are pretty smart folks, and so they were pretty versed with the aircraft as well. And so, no, I wouldn't say, they were leaning on me by any sense, but it was more, hey, Chief, get up here and tell me what this light is doing. Hey, Chief, come over here and help me with this. But no, the friendships I made with the flight crew, they were real. We had some great times on our trips. And yeah, the camaraderie is definitely there on the heavies. You are part of that crew. And so everyone does lean on each other. When we land somewhere, they'd be the first ones to grab the ladder for me, and I'm filling up oil in the engines and, running around and helping me out too. And so it was a very, team oriented time. Everybody was on the same page. We all had the same mission we were fighting for. I do remember one time in Afghanistan, I don't remember if it was Bagram or Kabul, but again, it was early on. We actually landed in the daytime, but we unloaded a bunch of minesweepers, and there was a bunch of TV crews videotaping that. And as we were getting ready to take off, there was like a big metal can on the tarmac, and we were getting ready to taxi over it. So the pilots throw on the brakes. And they basically said, hey, Chief, go out there and get rid of that can. We're going to suck that up into our engine. So not really thinking, I open the crew door, run out there, engines are blasting. And I take this metal container, and I'm like, well, let me just chuck this, off into the field, thinking I just want to get it out of the way. And then so we can get wheels up and get the heck out of there. And as I was throwing it, mid-air, the thought occurred to me that dirt I was throwing onto was just full of landmines. I mean, you could just see them. And luckily I didn't hit one, because that could have ended poorly. But yeah, just little things like that. I remember that. I was like, man, I should have just probably taken that piece of metal and brought it on board and thrown it in the trash can. But I just threw it off to the side into the dirt and almost hit a landmine. But
yeah, it's the last thing you need is IEDs going off, and you're trying to get out of there. And yeah, I mean, what crazy times, especially just being a kid and experiencing what most people will never see in their lifetime. Here you were at 19, 20, 21 years old in war in all these other countries, bringing in other kids to fight a war that would go on and would last for 20 years. Now, you had mentioned a tactical descent. Now, was this like coming into a hot zone? And if so, can you explain what exactly a tactical descent is for our listeners?
yeah, it was unsure of our surroundings as far as which enemies might still be out there. Again, this was probably October of 2001. And so this was fresh after everything was going on, maybe November. It was right around the beginning of the war. And so it's basically you're flying high to stay away from enemy targets trying to shoot you. And a lot of it is just small fire. There is some rocket propelled, I think, missiles they were trying to shoot at us too. And so we start up high, and then we don't want to just have this slow glide path going into the runway, where everyone can just take shots at us. So we just start high and basically just drop out of the sky. And then last minute, engines full throttle to pull up and out of it and then land. And so it's pretty intense, especially when you have a whole entire, aircraft full of equipment that's chained to the floor. And then you see those chains snap up because you're dropping so fast. The equipment wants to hit the ceiling and you're just hoping that one of those chains doesn't bust loose. And so, yeah, I mean, it was intense when we would come in tactical, and that probably happened a handful of times. And then as the months progressed and we got more control of the airspace around us, then we would do more just regular landing. But yeah, initially that's the way we would hit. It was usually at night, and it was a tactical descent.
Incredible. God, that's motivating. Just describing, just drop out, just you're coming out, folks. The C-17 is massive, folks, and this plane isn't like your average plane. This airplane is like magical. It could do so many things. As a very large plane, it could do so much. It can carry cargo, troops, you name it. This thing can fall out of the sky and it can get right up. It is powerful. It has a back hatch. Folks, this is the Cadillac of planes, or if Cadillacs are still cool, I don't know. But I'm born in the 70s, so that's always been the term. Like, it's the Cadillac of airplanes. Now, I want to get to something that may be a little emotional for you, and if it is, I don't want you to answer it, but I've been called to ask you this question. You began this war. You've seen it. You've dropped off troops. You have experienced a lot of things out there when this all began, and you would serve for years into this war. Now, just over 1 year ago, you saw the end of this war. You saw the end of what you guys were out there and what you were on the ground to do that started this whole entire war after 9/11. Now, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller, a United States Marine Corps infantry officer who has now become good friends of mine, was on my program a couple of weeks ago. And you may remember he was the Marine Lieutenant Colonel that really called out the highest levels of our government, to include generals all the way up to the President of the United States, for the immediate and botched withdrawal in Afghanistan that would end up costing, I think it was 12 Marines, a naval corpsman, and a soldier. And it was the most unstrategic way that you could ever end a war and leave all these assets on the ground, all the blood that has been shed over these last 20 years, all of the assets that we use, like, again, the lives, the service, the sacrifice, and to watch this devastating and disastrous end of a 20-year war. Additionally, you were a crew chief on a C-17, and I've got this just in my head, that C-17 taking off on that runway during this catastrophic event with all these Afghans holding on to the very airplane that you commanded and were the crew chief on for all these years. How does that make you feel as a veteran? How does that make you feel as a citizen of the United States of America, seeing how it started and how it ended?
Well, you just gave chills down my spine when you described the Afghans hanging onto the side of the plane. It was surreal. I don't know the right way to get out, but I know that wasn't it. And I just knew that there was going to be Afghans that had died in the landing gear there. There's a lot of room in there. You can crawl up in there for days. There's so much room. And so when I saw that they were rushing the planes and running alongside and hanging on, I 1,000% knew that there was people in that landing gear when it folded up, which would not be the way that I would choose to go. But just to see the desperation, that they'd be willing to hang on to the side of an aircraft, it was really hard to watch because I had been on that plane on that same airstrip, 20 years before, and so that it was hard to watch. It was hard to watch for sure.
I know you had a tough day, and you and I spent a lot of time on the phone that day talking, and it was as if it brought back so many memories. I remember the day you went to Afghanistan, and I remember the last time a C-17 would fly out of Afghanistan, and it's a shame, and it's very sad that that is how the United States of America would end a war that has taken so much from the American people, that has taken so much from the military population, and now a vulnerable and at risk veteran community with 22 veteran suicides per day, a lot to do with this war that you were in and helped fight. For the good of our country and for the good of our freedom, to keep that liberty bell ringing. Where do you see our military right now, Scott?
I don't have a whole lot of ins. I should say recently I haven't. I've talked with a couple special forces folks in the last few months, and they're good guys, and so I'm glad to see that they're still, those guys serving. I know a lot of the folks that we've communicated with and you've chatted with on your show are retired now. But I see the same, level of patriotism on the folks that are serving now. But I'm not in the mix as much as I was, 15, 20 years ago. It's been a while since I've been out, but I'm not the expert on that answer there. But I hope it's better than some of the stuff we see in the headlines. Hopefully we get away from some of the agendas that people are pushing, and we can have a force that's ready to fight some major adversaries in this world that don't like us. So,
Yes, I agree. Do you have what was the proudest moment when you served in the Air Force, Scott?
there's not really a single moment. I think it's just I was proud to be involved and active, so it's kind of by chance. But during 9/11, like I said, that really affected me in my entire life. Every day, every year that goes by on the anniversary, it's kind of a somber day for me. I was making breakfast this last 9/11. I think it was on a Sunday, and I just had the broadcast on for hours and just listening to the names of the folks that passed away that day, and that list just goes on and on and on. So I was just really proud to have served during that time and be able to do something, for the better of our country.
You are an honorable man, and I'm very proud to call you my brother. And like you said, you're making breakfast and you're hearing these names. Unfortunately, those aren't all the victims of this war. This war is continuing to take the lives of firemen in New York every day, and police officers that have lung diseases now, and they have cancers from all the fumes and the smoke and the dust that they breathe in. Then you have, like I said, veteran suicide, that are all a direct result of what happened on that September 11th in 2001 that started this changing, of history and the past, that all these different lives would end up taking, for our country. And I just don't want anyone to ever forget that. And I don't want any of this to ever be, not meaningful to all the lives that we lost over there and stuff like that. And that's the part where I have a hard time with the sacrifice, and people need to understand. You've been to 50, you've been to 50 countries?
50. It might even be 51 now.
Okay, so you've been to 50 countries. You flew in 50 combat operations. Most Americans have never really been out of the state they're in right now. And they don't understand what it's like in other countries. And they don't understand how great that they have it here in the United States of America. And that there is pride in being an American and fighting for your country and standing up, and fighting for what's right and doing it in an honorable way. And I know you've seen things that you can't unsee. I know you've been places that most people will never even know even exist. And you would descend in ways that people would say, holy shit, let me hold on to the old shit handles because we're going down, folks. Under fire, rockets, this and that, your life flashing before your eyes. You're hauling troops. You know they're going to go in. You got guys jumping off your airplanes. You don't know if they're Delta Force or if they're SEALs or whatever. All you know is that there's missions, and your mission and your goal was to preserve and to protect and defend the United States of America. And that's exactly what you did. And you did it well. And again, I'm damn proud of you.
Thank you, bro.
And I mean that. I want to end this program, Scott, just thanking you wholeheartedly for your service, because there's some things today that you told me that I haven't even known. And I know it's hard. I know you don't talk about it a lot, but I know your insight will definitely help add a lot of value to the folks out there that may need to hear it the most today. And again, I just want to thank you for joining us today. And we sincerely appreciate everything you have done and continue to do for our great nation. Your service, your sacrifice, and your dedication is truly admirable. Until next time, for Tuesdays with Tally, this is Brian Tally. Good night, Semper Fi, and God bless.